Welcome here to our Hope One show. Usually it's Frank Turek sitting in this seat, but he is away for the evening and he left me in charge, if you can believe that. Probably silly on his part to do that. He was originally going to be here with us. We're going to have a little bit of a dialogue and then we'll take open questions. Frank has to, what actually gets to, teach at a church locally tonight. So he asked me to take over, but I'm not alone, of course, because I have the mastermind, the real leader of crossexamine.org, which is Jorge, who is back, my partner in this, and he will be also helping you to get in the queue so that you can ask us questions. So, Jorge, why don't you tell them how we're going to do that?
All right, Jim. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. To have you hosting the Hope One show. The procedure is real simple. We're gonna send you to a landing page, crossexamine.org/SQ, and I'm actually gonna put it on the screen right now. And all you guys have to do is go to your browser, whether you're on your laptop or on your phone, take a quick break from this stream or open another tab and go to this landing page. Here, what you have to do in this is crossexamine.org/SQ. It stands for Skype questions. All you have to do, put in your real name. This first form here is for, or place right here is for your real name. Put your real name here, and then on the second spot or the second area right here, you put your Skype name or your Skype ID. That's usually the word live, colon, and then a series of numbers and characters that Skype's assigned for you or assigned to you when you open a Skype account. You can also put in your email. That's the email that is linked with your Skype account, and that will allow me to find you. Then you choose, we want to know whether you're a Christian, you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, or other, maybe you're a Muslim or you're a Buddhist. That's fine. We do want to dialogue with you, but you got to put it here. And here, you don't put your full question. You just put a quick summary of your question so our team can screen it, and then I will be contacting you. Okay, I will be contacting you. Just make sure that you have your notifications on your Skype, so I can actually reach out to you and tell you, hey, are you interested of coming in? You answer me, you say yes, I add you to my friend list, and then I'll put you on the list to come on live with Jim. Now, there's a few other things that I want to share with you. Number one, you fill out that. Number two, whenever I contact you, make sure that if you're on a mobile device, preferably have headphones. Okay, so that will allow us to keep the feedback to a minimum. And the other thing that I want you to do is to make sure that you use your phone horizontally. And from the time you open your Skype and I call you, you got to have your phone horizontally. This will allow me to bring you into the frame easily, because it usually takes about 2 to 3 minutes for me to frame you into the software so you can have a conversation with Jim. So that's how we're going to do it. Make sure that you have your notifications on Skype. Make sure that you add your Skype ID or the email that you have linked to Skype, and make sure that you have headphones, and make sure that your spot where you're sitting is well lit. That light should be in front of you, not behind you, so we can see your face. Those are just easy tips for you to have a great experience and for us to have a great time with you. With that being said, Jim, I'm going to give it back to you, brother.
All right. Very, very good. Looking forward to your questions. Now, what we're going to do is just start with a couple of comments before we get started. And I have a couple of questions I see I've already got in the queue. We'll try to answer those as well. Okay. It wasn't long ago. I was typing an article. And I was typing in an article, and I typed in the word disciple. And I was trying to use it as a verb, like to disciple somebody. And I got corrected. The autocorrect in the Word document kept on trying to, it didn't see it as a verb. It would always underline it in blue, like you're using the wrong word here. Because it didn't recognize the word disciple as a verb. It recognized the word disciple as a noun. And interestingly, I think this is where a lot of what we're trying to do, a lot of what Frank does, well, a lot of what Jorge does too, is we're trying to help disciple the next generation and the present generation of Christ followers, right? And a lot of that is active. It's not just that we are disciples, it's that we are called to make disciples, to disciple others. Even though your Word document may not recognize the word disciple as a verb, it really is intended to be a verb. And let me tell you how critical Christian discipleship is to Christian survival. We can see historically in those periods of time in which discipleship was not taking place that the consequence of not discipling new believers was horrific. It was catastrophic. For example, there was a movement of a widespread evangelism on the continent here in the North American continent, in America, called the Second Great Awakening. And this occurs in the 19th century, early 19th century. And this Second Great Awakening had some of the best preachers, open air preachers that had ever been seen. And it started around the 1790s and lasted till almost the middle of the 1800s, by 1840s. And really, it was the number of converts, especially the Protestant denominational converts, was tremendous. Okay, this is why we call it the Second Great Awakening. Charles Finney was probably like the one who was most often associated with this movement. At least here, there's lots of others, but Charles Finney is probably one of the ones you would probably recognize that name. But here's what happened: after the Second Great Awakening, the number of new believers exceeded the number of churches that could properly disciple them. And it's not a coincidence that on the backside of the Second Great Awakening, you have some of the greatest heretical movements that are either born or blossom in that period that followed the Second Great Awakening. So, for example, the Church of Latter-day Saints is from the region of the Second Great Awakening and right after the Second Great Awakening. And if you read the earliest writings of Joseph Smith on his observations of the many churches he visited, you can see that the problem really is a discipleship problem, is that people are not being taught what is true about Christianity. They're not being discipled. So they're not quite sure what's true. And if we don't disciple people, we just call them but don't disciple them. We're not, the call in Scripture is not just to preach the gospel, it's to make disciples. That's very different. That is an active process of teaching people. Disciples are simply learners. We have to help each other learn about what it is Jesus taught, what it is Jesus believed, what it is Jesus proclaimed. And so you'll see that the Mormon Church blossoms right after the Second Great Awakening. The Evangelical Christian Church in Canada, another kind of heretical movement. Let's see, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. The Jehovah's Witnesses, by the way, came from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So you'll see that a lot of these other pseudo-Christian belief systems pop up, largely because we had a huge number of recent converts who were not properly discipled. It's not a coincidence that those two movements, that the Second Great Awakening and all of these heretical movements that have followed, are so closely connected in the timeline. They're in that order for a reason. You might think, well, okay, so what is it really that's involved in discipling? Well, I think sometimes we use that word discipling and mentoring as interchangeable, but there is a difference between discipling and mentoring. I could mentor you in something that has nothing at all to do with Jesus. If you say, if you knew I was a 5-star sushi chef, you could ask me to mentor you because you want to be a sushi chef. And then to be honest with you, I could do that and help you to be an excellent chef without ever talking about Jesus at all. Discipling, from our perspective, is to point people to the discipler, Jesus of Nazareth, and to help you see how everything that Jesus taught affects every aspect of your life, including if you're a sushi chef. So the idea here is that discipling has got a distinctly Christian. It's not just centered on Jesus. It's empowered by Jesus, and it always seeks to go one generation more. So if I was your sushi chef mentor, I don't have any expectation. You may or may not decide to mentor somebody else as a sushi chef. But if I'm discipling you as a Christian discipling another Christian, the consequence of my discipling you is that I will not only help you to see what it is Jesus calls us to be, but you will actually end up embracing the role of discipling the next generation, because to be a good disciple of Jesus is to be a disciple maker yourself. That's part of the description. That's part of the nature of being a disciple of Jesus. So it's interesting to me that a lot of what we're trying to do when we answer questions, a lot of what we're trying to do when we're together examining what does Scripture say, what does Jesus say, is this active process of discipling each other. Now, here's what's great about it. If you're just mentoring somebody, well, you need a mentor to mentor somebody. But it turns out You can be discipled without an active mentor. Because what we're doing here is, I'm not asking you to accept what I say. I'm going to have to go back and point to the scripture. What did Jesus say? And it turns out that even if you weren't in the presence of somebody who can model this life for you, there's so much you can glean from the master himself through the words of the master on the pages of scripture that you can be discipled from that. This is why it's so important for us. And this is why it's so tragic that in America, we are so biblically illiterate. Even those of us who would say we are Christ followers, we're not quite sure what it is that Jesus says on a number of topics that we ought to follow to begin with. So it turns out that discipleship is different than mentorship in that, number one, it's Christ-centered, it's Christ-empowered. It is designed to help you take this information to the next generation, who will then also take it to the next generation that follows them. And it doesn't necessarily depend on a close personal relationship with a mentor as much as it depends on what is true from the words of Jesus as recorded on the pages of Scripture. So I just want to share with you that that's what we're doing tonight. We're actually helping each other to become better Christ followers. To what are the words? What did Jesus say about X, Y, or Z? And how does that impact our life? Every single nook and cranny, every single shadow, every single corner or hallway of our lives. And that's what we're going to do. A little bit of that tonight, and I hope it's helpful for you. So, Jorge, given that's our goal tonight, let me start by just answering one of the first questions that's going to come in.
Before you start the question, I do want to ask you and everybody who are watching to give us a couple of minutes. I just notified the team that for some odd reason, Skype is not pulling up all the people that I'm trying to bring in. It just keeps looping. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to this slide right here. We're going to take about a minute break. We're going to hang up. I'm going to reboot Skype, and then we're going to come back on. So just be on standby. I call you back, and then I'll do the reset, and then we'll get back with the show. So what I'm going to do that, and I'm going to put everybody on standby, and we'll be right back.
Cool. Okay, so the wizardry of Jorge, he has managed, as usual, to fix whatever small glitches may occur in this complicated system, which we are actually innovative in using, I think, anyway, Jorge. So this is actually really cool. So while you're queuing up the first call, let me answer a quick question that came in related to, should Christians be participating in MMA or mixed martial arts? Okay. Well, look, there's two ways we could look at mixed martial arts. And I think when we're really talking about like cage fighting or like the UFC. Is that what we're talking about? That'd be like kind of a similar question to saying, well, could Christians, if that's what we're talking about, just the physical act of combat in a cage, if we're talking about that as MMA, well, if that's all we're talking about, that's a similar question than you've been asking. Well, could Christians be involved in boxing? Could Christians be involved in any sport that involves physical aggression or physical assertion? I think you would say yes, because we're limiting this to just the act of the physical interaction, the competition. What I think most of us would say where it gets dicier is where you are connecting a physical discipline with a spiritual outlook, a spiritual worldview. And I can tell you that most places that you're going to, well, at least where I am, our kids have been involved in a number of these different taekwondo or different things where, to be honest, there was never even a hint that this dojo was going to go anywhere beyond simply the physical tools. There was no like spiritual mindset. There was no meditative process. It was purely a physical interaction, a physical training environment. And if that's really what it is, that's all we're talking about, is the physical nature of these types of interactions. Well, then there's really no harm in it at all, right? I mean, it's no more, you would say there's no more concern from a Christian perspective than there might be concern if you were boxing as a Christian. Now, you might want to argue, well, is this something that is if you have some position or pacifism where you feel like this is an integral part of your Christian faith. Now, I've talked a lot about that. That's not something that I think is dictated by Scripture, that we become pacifists. But my whole point is, the danger is not, of course, in the physical interaction. The danger is there a spiritual component which dictates a view that is different than the biblical view about the nature of God, the nature of our existence, the nature of how it is, of the spiritual realm, all those kinds of things. So I think that it's really going to be on a dojo by dojo basis. You'll find, as a parent, I wanted to see what was going on with my kids when they were in that kind of training, and I was satisfied really early on. This was simply going to be a matter of physical tools. That's what they were basically practicing, were physical tools. But I'm sure there's probably different dojo to dojo, so it'll be up to you to kind of be discerning about that. All right, that being said, I think we're about ready to hop into a
Yep.
question. Am I right, Jorge?
Yeah, Jim, I just want to say Cobra Kai never
That's right.
dies. Okay.
That's right.
We got Amanda here.
Very
Amanda,
true.
go ahead on and unmute your microphone and welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm glad you called us.
Good. So, I have an 11-year-old daughter. She'll be 12 in September. We have had. I recently discovered she had some thoughts about God that I wasn't aware of. I thought that she had gone through the process of, being born again, and I don't think that's the case. My concern, I guess, is how do I make up for the time that maybe I haven't been very consistent with showing her what a Christian life should look like. I'm not sure, or maybe is it too late? Like, has there been too much time passed? Are we just doomed now? I don't know.
Boy, that is the quintessential question as voiced by a concerned parent, right? Is it too late? Did I mess this whole thing up? And I look, you're really expressing a view that a lot of us have as parents, right? Where we're struggling to, hindsight is always 20/20. And when you get to this point, and my kids are all grown now, you think, well, gosh, if I'd have done this when they were high schoolers, if I had done that, listen, the more kids you have, the more exponential these concerns become. So let me first just start by saying, take a deep breath. And it's going to be okay. I was very cantankerous, not just at that age, but until I was 35. And if you'd have met me at 34 and said, do you think this Wallace is ever going to be a Christian? Everyone I knew would have said, no, that dude's never going to be a Christian. And then a year later, I'm opening the Bible for the first time and actually like investigating it. So I'm pretty patient with my own kids, right? Because I know that my journey was pretty, antagonistic. And here I am. So God will do what God will do. And yes, you've done a good job. The fact that you're even concerned about it right now demonstrates that you're continuing to do a good job. So first of all, deep breath. You're doing fine. Now, number two, this is a great time to start these conversations because you caught it just in time. She's 12, right? She's going to be 12.
Correct.
Okay, so that means she's in the 5th, going into the 6th grade or 6th grade now?
Yep.
Okay,
starting
excellent.
6.
So it turns out that, if you'd have talked to people in my generation, most of the people in my generation would have first encountered people who did not believe what they believed or held a different worldview, probably when they get to college, maybe in high school, but for the most part, you're a little bit older before you start butting heads with the entire, the pantheon of worldviews that are out there. So it's that number's dropped because we have the glowing rectangles, and the glowing rectangles change everything. So the question is, I wanted for my own kids to resist their ability to be impacted by all the pressures of the world as long as I could. So I resisted their efforts to get on a phone, and they were expensive, and I just resisted those efforts, and I was able, of course, remember, I was starting much earlier, so this technology was more like a flip phone technology for my oldest son. And by the time my youngest daughter she's had the potential for a cell phone. Now, I would try first of all, is that you are probably still the primary voice in her life. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. That means you have the best window of opportunity right now. So when you say that you think maybe she's not what you thought she was, do you mean this in terms of maybe she doesn't understand the theological principles that you thought she once understood? Or do you think, no, you know what, she doesn't even believe this is true anymore? Which of those two do you think it is?
I think I maybe underestimated what she understood to begin with. I'm not so sure that she really does understand depravity, of just mankind without Jesus Christ. Specifically, we were talking yesterday, and we had some open conversation, and I said, so what do you enjoy about church? Because we go, every Wednesday night, we go every Sunday morning. She looks forward to it. She's disappointed if she can't because she's at her dad's or something like that. And she said, my friends.
Yeah.
I said, okay,
I
that's
could have
fine.
answered that before you gave me the answer. I could have given you the answer. Go ahead.
And so I just kind of pried a little bit more and just started asking her, do you understand what this means? No. And more specifically, I asked, do you think it matters? Like, does it bother you when I explain, this to you? And pretty much for all of these answers, she says, no, it doesn't really concern me that you think I should dress modestly, but I don't want to because it looks cuter to, do things this way. I'm rambling here and I'm losing my train of thought.
Well, okay. So what's really great about this, though, is that so look, a lot of times, I think our kids will sometimes answer the questions we ask them. So we have great opportunities to ask different kinds of questions, right? So you already knew probably before you started. What is she? She's 12. And she's entering the two most important critical formation years, I think, of any young person, which are junior high, 7th and 8th grade. This is where the rubber meets the road. As a youth pastor, I will tell you, by the time my students were like in high school, they kind of already figured out whether they were. And you'll look at most people who survey young people trying to figure out, well, when was it that you decided you no longer wanted to be a Christian? You'll find it's between the ages of 10 and 17. So it starts a lot earlier than we think. It's that we can't blame universities for what's happening with young people because they're leaving while they're still with us. They're just not telling us. And you caught it because you started asking some good questions, right? So one of the questions is like, why do we go to church? Not what do you enjoy most about church, but why are we going to church? Now, it may be the same answer for her because my friends are there. And that's okay. Now, that's a starting point. And while you still have the influence you have, because she's only 12, I've been turning 12, take advantage of this next 12 months to talk to her about the nature of God. Not so much the nature of church, because that's so secondary. I'm talking about the nature of God. And why do we believe that this stuff is true to begin with? And what is it that we think our need is that Jesus actually answers? Like how is it that Jesus fixes us? It's a felt need issue for a lot of young people, right? Like, hey, like why does this matter to me? Sean McDowell and I wrote a book called So the Next Generation Will Know, and it's targeted at this age group, and it's for parents, teachers, and pastors. And the reason why we wrote it is because we felt like, wow, we have to help parents with some practical strategies to start engaging their kids in conversation. So I would say two things to you. That book I think would be very helpful for her. But also Natasha Crane has a number of books written that are perfect for you. How to have conversations with your kids about Jesus, how to have conversations with your kids about God. And both of those books will help you also navigate culture that'll address issues like what clothing we wear and things like that. But let me just encourage you with one last thing. Do your best, if you can, to focus not so much on what are the obligations that we then as Christians ought to embrace as Christ followers, because that just sounds like this is all about a set of rules.
Right.
Like to be a Christian is about what I can wear, what I can't wear, what I can say, what I can't say, who I can hang out with, who I can't hang out with. No, that's not what it's about. It's about a sense of the need we have as sinners for the Savior and the grace that's been bestowed upon us that then results in us loving and wanting not to be a slave to sin anymore, but a slave to the Master, out of a love relationship with the Master. And that's what I want my young people to know. Now, look, by the way, did I do a great job of that? No. And I'm a Christian apologist. So I just want you to realize that it's harder sometimes with your own kids than it is with strangers' kids, because they get a chance to see all the good side of you, the bad side of you. And there's a lot more time in your day that you probably spend doing what you're doing right now, bouncing a toddler on your lap, right? And taking care of your home than there is on the spiritual formation of your kids. So what I would say to you is just start taking advantage of every opportunity to shift the conversation toward what Jesus does for us that we cannot do for ourselves. And be patient with yourself in that process. But there are good tools out there. It's not just, in her case, it's not just so much, well, what are the facts and why is Christianity true? That's great. And she needs to know that. But a lot of this is, what is it that we need? What is it? Where are we so flawed? And what is life like without the grace of God? So those two things together are going to be important to her. But those resources, I think, will also be helpful for you, those books. So I love that you got your hands full. So that's just awesome. All right. So I hope that helps us a little. Does that make sense, though, what I'm saying?
Yes. I will look into each of those books.
Yeah, Natasha Crane's books are great for parents. And I think between those three resources, I think you'll see that those might help you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's great. Okay, Jorge, so let me think about this. Let me take another...
Jim, I actually have a super chat for you right here and from YouTube, and he says, I have a friend who is an unbeliever and would love to use apologetics in my approach. I'm a rookie in apologetics, but would love to get your opinion as to how I can start the conversation. Totally fangirling right now, by the way. Jan227 from YouTube.
Well, okay, I'll tell you this right now. We're all, in some ways, amateurs in what we're doing, right? In the sense that there's some level at which I know a little bit about this or that, and I'm always going to be less knowledgeable than somebody else, and maybe a little more knowledgeable than somebody else. And that's where we all are on that spectrum, right? So I'm not going to be intimidated by the fact that I may not be the best scholar in X, Y, or Z, but I might know something about this one little niche-y thing that I'm geeked out on that actually has provoked me to study more, or maybe just to be able to provide a better answer. And I'll bet you there's something like that for you too. So if I asked you, like, what is the one thing that you really found compelling about the evidence for God or the evidence for Christianity, you may not know everything about the cosmological argument, but maybe you were always struck with the fact that moral law needs to be tied to a transcendent, objective moral lawgiver. I don't know what it is, but when I started, it was like I just had this one notion that I thought was very powerful, and I used to read about it all the time. And although I wasn't a great generalist at that point, I was at least, a pretty decent specifist. I could be very specifically good at what I was trying to do. So what I would say to you is, if you can just focus on the things, that one little area that you might be able to master, that's a good place to start. Or, and we always say the same thing. I think Frank and I would both say that we have sold more tactics books than Greg Koukl has ever sold. Like, we should be getting a royalty for tactics books, okay? Because I don't know that even Greg sells as many as we do. But I will tell you that even if you thought, I want to take an apologetics approach, but I'm not quite sure I know enough in specific areas to accomplish the job, well, Greg's process of 3 questions, what do you mean by that? Why do you think that's true? And have you considered this alternative? Those kinds of questions that are described in tactics are a great way to start if you don't feel like you're a master of any one area. So if you just learn how to ask good questions, you'll actually be in a pretty good place, because you can always tell that person you're talking to, you made some good points today. I love the points you made today. It makes me want to research it more. So let me do that, and I'll get back to you next week. Now you sound like you're in the game, which you are, and you can actually learn while you're away from each other. So hopefully that helps a little bit to get started when you don't feel like maybe you're a master of everything, and because none of us are. All right, that being the case, who's up next, Jorge?
Great answer, Jim. And he just corrected me, Brent, because I said Brett, but I was thinking about Greg Koukl, but Brent corrected me. Welcome to the show. You can go ahead and unmute your mic, brother. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brent.
Okay, thank you very much. Hey, Jim. I'm from the Philippines, by the way, and it's nice to meet you. It's a good thing I stayed awake, because I actually woke up too early for this show. So thank you for accepting me, Jorge, and thank you for accepting my question, Jim. So anyway, this is what I would want to clarify. If correct me if I'm wrong, but you also mentioned maybe somewhere, or I saw in one of your maybe I saw in some quotations of you that you said that you do not believe in Christianity because it works for you, but you believe in Christianity because it's true. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, you are. I say that a lot, as a matter of fact. And Greg Koukl hates that I say that. And he's always told me, you shouldn't word it that way. You should word it differently. But I actually, honestly, have felt that way many times. So, yes, I have said that.
Okay. Do you also do you also consider it as you saying that you're a Christian not because it works for you, but you are a Christian because it's true, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay. But here's how I thought of it, because I was thinking that am I really a Christian because it's true, or am I a Christian because there is something about Christianity that makes me gravitate towards it? Because
Mm,
the thing, because how I perceive Christianity being true, therefore I should be a Christian. To me, it sounds more associated with intellectual assent, but I believe, as I understand it, that being a Christian is more than just intellectual assent. And as I recalled, Frank, in one of your Q&A sessions, that being a Christian also means being called for a loving relationship between us and God, right?
yes.
So, so rather than just having an intellectual assent, wouldn't you consider that we should be Christian not just because it's true? Of course, we need it to be true, because if it's not true, then what's the point? Not just because it's true, but because being a Christian means that it's our response to the love of Christ for us, because we know from 1 John 4:18 that we love because he first loved
That's right.
us. So wouldn't
Yep.
you consider that we should be Christian not just because it's true, but also because it's our response to Christ's love for us? That's my question, sir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And here's why I say it that way. Number one, of course, when you say anything using a set of terms, you need to define the terms, right? So when I say I'm not a Christian because it works for me, what do I mean by it works for me? And I'll tell you a story of a young man I met recently who was part of a process, a discipleship process, a larger conference over a period of days. And I actually was able to meet this young man. And he said that he was had been raised a Christian. As long as you remember, he'd been a Christian. But in a conference setting like this, where he was really learning about what Christianity really was, he had been a Christian his whole life so far, but had never really kind of deep dived into what that even means. What do we believe? And how do our beliefs then impact the world around us and how we interpret the world around us? And as he learned more about what Christianity was, he realized how countercultural it is. How to live in our secular culture here in America meant that for many years, people would say, "Well, look, I love Jesus. I just don't like Christians," or "I love Jesus. I think Jesus is cool, but I don't like Christianity." Well, actually, I think that's shifting. I don't think people like the moral teaching of Jesus anymore. The moral teaching of Jesus related to marriage, gender identity, sanctity of life. You can go on and on, right? So it turns out that I think that to be a Christian now, this young man was going, wow, the more I learn about what it is to be a Christian, the less I'm sure I want to be one anymore. And I thought, oh, he's experiencing exactly what I was talking about when I say that I'm not a Christian because it works for me. If what I mean by works for me is that I'm not a Christian because it makes life easier on this side of the grave. I'm a Christian because it's true and I know what God has done for me. And the only appropriate response to the truth about the grace of God that's been extended to me is for me to respond with that kind of grace toward others and that kind of grateful response toward Him. That is the truth. And that's what holds me in place. So I don't think what you and I are saying is all that different, because it turns out that the truth, what's true, is the love of God that's been extended, that even while I was a sinner,
Yeah.
Christ would die on that cross for me. If that's true, that is going to change the way I see others and change the way I see God, change the way I see. It's going to change everything. And even if it means that the beliefs that I hold to are going to rub the culture wrong and maybe even cost you your job, like it did for Frank. It may even cost you your status in a larger culture, like it has for many. It may cost you your popularity on social media, for sure, where you'll be the nail that everyone's trying to hammer. That's already happening. It may cost you your popularity at school because you won't be embracing the teaching of your teachers and the teaching of your professors, nor the status of the celebrity of your friends, right? Because they're not going to see you as somebody they want to hang around. Because it turns out you're going to have to reject a lot of what the culture now values in order to be a disciple of Jesus of Nazareth. And that's why we better know it's true because it's going to make things a little harder. And when I heard this young man say, yeah, the more I realize what Christianity is, he realized how hard it was going to be. Now, remember, Jesus tells us this. It's not a coincidence, that everyone loves the Beatitudes. Everyone loves the blessed are are those who mourn, blessed are those, everyone loves that stuff, right? Until you get to the end. And it's blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Blessed are you, not if, when people insult you and persecute you and falsely accuse you of all kinds of evil because of me. That's not an if. That's a when. By the way, I love the fact that you've got the background roosters crowing. So I feel like we're in a biblical scene right now, and Peter is about to deny somebody. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a prediction of Jesus. This is from the very beginning. This was never supposed to be the kind of worldview that would make your life easier. So that being said, I think you and I actually agree. It's just how we would define what is truth.
Yeah, because I also get confused with the wording of some people. That's why I would really love clarification. By the way, I love how you mentioned the roosters.
Yeah,
I didn't
awesome.
notice there were roosters cawking already, and then when I noticed, oh yeah, there were really roosters.
Yeah,
But
that's
anyway, with
awesome.
regards to your explanation, actually, I actually agree with all of them. I agree that truth really is important because once again, if it's not true, then what's the point?
Right.
But in my case, like if I would reflect on myself, like did I really become a Christian because it's true, or is it because of Christ's love for us? Now, by the way, when I say it's because of Christ's love for me that I'm a Christian, that doesn't mean that I am neglecting the persecution. If God says it will happen, it will definitely happen. And
Right.
all the hardships that we go through, it will definitely happen. But my mindset is that all of these that are happening right now is definitely not without purpose. But when I think about other people, like I even ask people, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? As you
Good.
know, that's the question that Frank would use.
Yes.
And the most recent person I've asked this to, by the way, of all the people I've asked this, there's not one who said yes. And the most recent one whom I asked this to, she said that if Christianity were true, then its sets of rules is also true. Therefore, I would become an antichrist. So it's a moral objection right off the bat. And it really breaks my heart because because you're being asked if Christianity were true. Why wouldn't you become a Christian if it's true? Because
That's right.
people are fearful about what Christianity is all about based on their own understanding. I mean, even me, when I was an agnostic before, right off the bat, when I see this imagery of Christianity, when I see what I read in the Bible with, like, by hindsight, for example, it's gonna become nasty. Like, I really don't find this attractive. I really don't find this gravitating. So it really breaks my heart. But
Yeah.
maybe maybe I was thinking that there has to be a reason why people gravitate to Christianity aside from the fact that it's true. It has to be important that it's true, but there is also something else in that truth that would make them gravitate to being Christians at the very end of the day. What do you think about that?
Okay, so let me answer that, and then we're going to have to go to another question. But great
Okay.
question so far. Thanks so much, Brent, for doing this. Let me just answer that real quickly. I think that to say that, hey, do we embrace this because it's true, or is it because that Jesus loves us? Well, no, we embrace it because it's true that Jesus loves us, right?
Yes.
It's like, what is the truth? Like, I can find out that the truth of the Holocaust. It's not going to make me want to be part of the Holocaust. So just the fact that something is true, it's what about it is true. And this is what we're talking about with the Christian worldview. Is the truth of the Christian worldview so powerful that it'll hold me in place, even though the world around me will begin to reject me? Yes, that the truth of the Christian worldview is so powerful because it's that truth we talked about. That even while I was still a sinner and ignoring God altogether, He pursued me and died for me on the cross. Now that fact is transformational, right? Now, but let me say one more thing before we go to the next question, and that's that I used to think that if I could just find the right set of words, I could I took that Strength Finders test years ago, and the Strength Finders test just tells you after answering all these questions, what are your 1 through 5, I think, strengths, and the number one for me was winning over others. And I thought, okay, that really reflects how I used to feel as an interviewer. You know, when I was interviewing suspects, I used to think, if this guy doesn't tell me the truth, it's because I failed, because I didn't find the set of words that would have allowed him to loosen up or break down his barriers and tell me the truth. Like, I felt all the responsibility that for any particular person I might be talking to, there was a set of words that would be persuasive, but I might not know what those words are. My job is to try to figure out what are the words that would be persuasive for this guy. Well, if you carry that over into evangelism, you're going to get frustrated really quick. It doesn't work that way. People build up barriers. And I realized this in jury selection, right? We select a jury, and we exclude the people that we know are unpersuadable. By the way, both sides want to do this. Defense attorneys and prosecutors are trying to get the edges off that large group so that we end up with people who are at least open to persuasion. They're at least open to hearing the case and making a decision on the basis of evidence. They aren't so closed-minded that they won't even give you a hearing. So, but what we discover, of course, is that we're going to eliminate people. There's a recent trial here in Los Angeles called the Robert Durst case. It's a very famous case. The person who I did all my cases with, John Lewin, the DA, he is trying this case. So I'm tracking pretty closely. We talk on the phone a lot. And I will tell you that they had 400 jurors before they began to get to 12 in the box, 11 alternates, 23. From 400 to 23. Well, what are they excluding? We're excluding the people who are unpersuadable on both edges. They're either unpersuadable for the prosecution or unpersuadable for the defense. Well, it turns out there are people like that. And when we ask the question, if Christianity was true, would you become a Christian? We're really trying to basically do a voir dire process, like a jury selection. We're trying to figure out who's who in the zoo and who is actually going to be open to the gospel right now and who isn't. And I know, like you, that all of this is the power of God to move somebody into a category where they are actually open to the gospel. And until God does that, there's really, you could say this and you think, well, how could anyone say that if it was true they wouldn't? Well, because they are in that category of unpersuadable people that have not yet had their hearts open to the gospel by the gospel creator, the gospel writer, God himself. That's who does that, by the way. So that's why when I hear those words from people, I know you're in prayer mode. You're in prayer mode. Don't damage the relationship anymore by misbehaving, and just be praying about this. And at some point, if it's God's will, he will soften the heart of the person you're talking to. Anyway, I appreciate your question, Brent. I really do. So I'm going to let Jorge go to the next. Thanks so much. Have a great day there.
Thank you very much,
brother.
Jim. God
All right,
bless.
talk to you soon.
Jim,
Okay.
Jim,
Let's see
hey,
now.
hey, I'm going to tell you, man, I knew I was sus when you were the one interviewing me when I started with cross-examining. So I know I was sus. I'm just going to say that there. I'm going to put it back to you and just pick a question so I can bring our next guest, Eric, in.
That's so funny. Okay. Someone wrote in and asked this question. What are your thoughts about the Talpiot Tomb? Now, I was telling Jorge earlier that one of the problems when we use these nice cameras, he doesn't have this problem because Jorge has every bit of technology that's available to human beings. Okay, it's all in that same room that you see him sitting in. So, but I don't have all that technology. So when I plug my USB channel, USB cable into my for the camera into the tower that I have, it pretty much cuts off every other cable, every other USB port that I have, and that includes my keyboard. So I knew when I got this, that if somebody asked a question and I wanted to show them something on the screen, good luck with that, because it's hard to type. But here, I did find it. I was actually able to do it. Okay, so what I want to do, I know that Jorge is going to go nuts if I try to share a screen here, but I am going to share a screen anyway. So let me see if I can do that here. Here we go. All right, cool. So here's I hope is this going to work, Jorge, if I share a screen?
Well, I can, hold on, Jim. I can make it work, so just give me a second.
But see, Jorge can do everything. This is the great thing about working with him. He can.
Hold on. Let me get Eric squared in, and then I'll do the screen share. So
let's do Eric first, okay?
Hold on. So I got Eric. Now I'm gonna do the screen share. I'm gonna bring in the network, and this is your screen share. And now, if I'm not mistaken, the screen share, there is a gray block on top of it. I think that's something that is your Windows computer. Do you have a window on top? That block right there, just move it away, whatever. Right, there you go. And now, voila.
There it is. Okay, so I've written about this, and I wrote about it extensively many years ago. It was actually the Talpiot Tomb. the challenge here is that a tomb was published several years ago, like 15 years ago now or something. It's been a long time, and it was called the Talpiot Tomb. And so I've written an article about it, and I've given you what the claim is. You'll see on this where it's at the Cold Case Christianity website, coldcasechristianity.com. Just type in Talpiot, Talpiot, and you'll see what the original claim was, and then why I think the evidence is pretty good that this is not the tomb of Jesus. Sorry, it isn't. And part of the problem, of course, is how would we ever? I'm going to stop sharing that screen. You can stop sharing it now, Jorge. The question is, how would we ever know? I just wanted to point you to that article so you can see that we have written about it at length. That article is super long, and I'll tell you why. I was a youth pastor when this claim was first being made. And sure enough, as a youth pastor, my students were watching this special on TV, and they were shook by it, and they wanted to know, is this actually the tomb of Jesus? So I did the research on it to make sure if it, how deep is the claim? How significant is the claim? How significant is the threat? If it is, in fact, but if there was any way this could in some way be true, how would you know? How would you be able to tie the common name of Jesus with the common name of Mary, with the common name of Joseph in the first century? Like, what is the combination they think would give you this identification? So that being said, I think that the evidence against the Talpiot tomb is significant, and I hope that article is helpful. It's super long, but I try to cover it from every possible angle. And I remember when I went through it with our students, they were like, okay, we get it. Stop talking. This is too much information. So it is deeper than it probably needs to be, but I wanted you to have every possible resource on it at that website. Okay, so that being the case.
Excellent, Jim. Now, can you start sharing your screen on Skype? And while you do that, I will bring Eric in. Eric, welcome to the show. Go ahead and unmute your mic, brother.
Okay, got it. Hey, so Jorge, do I need to unshare right now?
Unshare, okay? Yeah. So I can bring the other. Let me see if it
doesn't allow. Okay, got it. We're good.
There you go.
All right, Eric, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well. It's good to. It's actually good to see you again. I met you a long time ago in Tucson.
Absolutely,
5 years ago.
I do remember. As a matter of fact, it's interesting that we are doing this from all. I was just thinking, look where we are, right? So you're in Tucson. I'm in Orange County, just below Los Angeles County, and then we've got Jorge way over on the East Coast. So this is why it's crazy we're able to navigate all this. But okay, so good to see you again, though, brother. Good to see you.
You too. Yeah. So my question is, my wife and I were talking just today, just an hour ago actually. We were discussing the what seems to be like a great chasm between sharing truth with somebody who is seeking the truth, kind of what you were just talking about a few minutes ago, versus just the hecklers. For example, like if you're engaging on Facebook or a group or something like that about abortion, it seems like it's hard to bridge the chasm between those who are actually seeking abortion, who maybe their dad kicked them out of the house because they've had a baby out of wedlock, or they're pregnant out of wedlock, or they were raped, or something that's just horrific, versus the hecklers who are just like on the maybe ultra feminist side, or the ones who are just there to argue, or maybe they're just far left Democrat or something like that, and they really don't even care about abortion, but they just want to fight against you because you're on the right.
Yeah.
And so not just abortion, but LGBTQ issues, even atheism versus intelligent design, where they just want to argue just to argue. So I was just trying to figure out what's a good method to reach those who really are seeking the truth, or really do need love, versus the ones who are just there to fight against you. It seems it seems really hard. I know we can just like on an atheist page, I can easily identify the ones who aren't there to seek the truth, right? That's easy. I can tell, like on Stephen Meyer's page, for example, there's always 2 or 3 people there just to argue every single thing that he posts. So those ones are easy. But the ones who really do need our love, it seems like they're just kind of like hiding in the shadows, or they're not the ones that come up front to talk to you. it's always
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I think, and again, you're looking at a guy, the old guy. Okay, so the old guy. This is the old guy's opinion. Okay,
we only got about 10 years on me. I know I look young, but you only got about 10 years on me. So okay.
Okay, so I just want you to know that you can say, hey, that's just the old guy's view if you want to.
Okay.
I just know that social media is not making us more social.
Mhm.
Social media is making us more tribal. Social media is making us more political.
Yep.
Social media is making us lose our virtuous character altogether because we're able to wear the masks that we wear on social media. And all of us do it, even those of us who put our own pictures on there. I'm only showing you the small slices of my life that I choose to show you, which give you a misperception about the totality of my life. Because let's face it, none of us are going to air our dirty laundry on social media. We're just going to give you the best of ourselves on social media. The entire thing is a masquerade, okay? Now, I also know that the most persuasive you will ever be, especially for eternity, is when you connect your relationships with your information. I've said this a number of times. We wrote about this in that book, so the next generation will know, for young people. Connecting your relationships with the information you wish to use with people or to give to people is the most persuasive you will be. So, for example, if you had a daughter and she was curious about Christianity, you could say, well, here's Jim's book. Really, she doesn't know me. Okay, so that's good. I mean, I'm glad you would consider this to be a worthy book to give her, but better would be for you to master the contents of the book, because then you'll be the source of information, and you do have the relationship part already there. I have the information part, but no relationship. You have the relationship, but maybe don't have the information yet. Once you get the information, you have the key that is unlocking all the doors, which is a relationship and information. Now, how does that pertain to social media? Okay. So look, I'm like you. I've got a social media presence. I'm not saying that the only people I will share Jesus with are the people with whom I have a strong relationship. No, of course not. But I know that I am not going to do this publicly. If somebody, you can tell, I always say that jury selection is like a 1 to 4 process. 1 are the sold out pro prosecution guys. 4s are the sold out pro defense people. And the 2s and 3s are people on just one side or the other, but they're reasonable. They're kind of in the reasonable middle. Mm-hmm. The edges are what we get rid of when we do jury selection. We want people in the reasonable middle, even though they might be on one side or the other of the issue. That's what I'm looking for in social media as well. So when I'm posting and I see that there's people, like you said, like the Stephen Meyer people who are always banging on him, and it's always the same 5 or 6 people, they're in the 4 category. They're already that far extreme. I'm not going to waste time on 4s. I'll be honest with you. Once I know you're committed to 4 and you're just there to hammer all the nails that are 1, 2s, and 3s, I'm going to block you. If you want to do that on somebody else's platform, knock yourself out. Yeah. But I'm only interested in 2s and 3s. I'm not even interested in 1s, the sold out Christian folks. Okay. Sometimes those folks could be as irritating as the 4s. Okay. Because they don't even think apologetics matters. They're like, hey, it's all faith. You don't even need apologetics. I'm glad that's for you, but this is a silly waste of time, because what kind of stupid question is that you should just have faith? Okay, really? Okay. So I will usually mute those folks. Uh-huh. And I don't want to offend them. Right. But I'll block the ones who are just hammers looking for a nail, because I'm really interested in developing a relationship with the 2s and 3s. And then as soon as you know you've got a 2 or a 3, get off the social media and start direct messaging those people. Say, hey, direct message me. Friend them on social media so they can direct message you. And then right away get them to an email exchange. Get them as close as you can into a relationship if you feel like you actually can share effectively the gospel with them when they're serious. Because again, it's relationship and information together that are the most persuasive. Mm-hmm. And social media is not the place for relationships. I'm sorry, it's just not. It's just too easy to be misread, to misread my tone. To be honest, I used to have all this, of course, as this kind of grew on my own public platform kind of grew, I'm able to do this less and less. But the first, I would say 5 or 6 years that we had a website, it was called pleaseconvinceme.com. The first 5 or 6 years that we had that website, if somebody started, I saw that I'm evaluating juries, and I'm thinking, okay, this guy's a 1, this guy's a 2, this guy's a 4. Well, when I found a 2 or a 3, a 2 is a Christian who's kind of like not quite sure it's true. A 3 is an atheist who's like not quite sure that's true. Well, I wanted to talk to those people, so I would simply email them and say, hey, what's your cell phone number? And I would call them on the way home from work, because I had an 1.5-hour drive from Los Angeles County. Mm-hmm. So I would just call them on the way from work, and we just have these long conversations in an effort to really get to know somebody well enough so you can hear my voice, hear my tone. If I say something and type it, you may not have any idea what I really am saying. or what my real attitude is. So for me, it came down to even if I'm going to be on social media and you're vetting through all these responses, when you see there's somebody whose God is either calling or who's struggling in their faith, reach out to them personally and see if you can get them in a, because I don't want to have that exchange back and forth where somebody else can be like, hammer that again. No, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. Instead, I'm going to say that's a private conversation that you and I are going to have, because I want them to realize I care enough about them to not just, this is not about me trying to build and I've seen a lot of people do this. They'll say, oh no, that conversation will help others. I suppose it will. I mean, it probably will. I'm not going to deny that. But what I'm really after is that at this point in my life, in the end, if I don't get to the gospel, if I don't get to what really matters in this whole thing, which is the gospel, because you know what? My clever conversations and my clever arguments about abortion, my clever arguments about any issue that's in public, that's not going to be nearly as transformational as, let's see, the gospel. The gospel changes everything. So I don't want to do this in my own power. I want to eventually, at some point, where do I get to a point where I know enough about this person that I can see what their need is, and I can see the best way to present the gospel of Jesus Christ. I can see where their sin is, where it is their need is, and I can offer the remedy, because the gospel cures every kind of stupid that you've ever encountered. Stupid thinking, stupid behaviors, stupid regrets, stupid guilty thoughts. All that stupid is solved by the gospel. So I'm just interested at this point in doing that in a private way that is actually powerful. Now, do I also, like, you and I are also going to have a public platform as well. But once I identify our 2 or 3, we're going to start to get in a relationship, because that's where we're going to have the most persuasion.
Yeah, I agree. I think, with you being in apologetics, cross-examined, all these different programs out there, I think that it does a great job at reaching those who are already, interested. They're already, the wheels are churning up there. I mean, I'm not going to go to your website unless some wheels are already turning ahead.
That's right.
So I think on social media, I think it's pretty easy to really weed those people out. The hard part is that the loudest voices today have control of the media. They have control of YouTube. They have control of Facebook.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's only a matter of time before you're not allowed to have a YouTube channel because you're a Christian or whatever else, or you just have a different view. So I'm just trying to figure out how to bridge that chasm between these really loud voices who don't care about the truth versus the ones who are just hiding under the umbrella of the loud voices who really do need the truth. They're
I'm going to give you a strategy that may help you with this. Okay, and probably others are listening too. I always tell people that I don't, for the most part, I serve with a lot of ministries, but I don't get paid by those ministries. When I serve with Stand to Reason, I serve as a volunteer. When I hang out with Frank, I try to do like tonight. My whole point was, I used to always say, if you didn't hire me, you can't fire me. And I don't need to be hired because I have a pension as a detective. So also we learn to live on pretty little if you're a cop. So we kind of make that work. So, but it's the same thing is true here. Voices are only loud if you're listening. So what I've decided to do is I'm not listening anymore. I'm not listening to that noise. And this is why, for the most part, I've just kind of blocked that stuff out so I can focus on those people who aren't screaming, who actually want to know if it's true. So this is why the best strategy I can offer, again, this is the old man strategy I warned you about earlier, is that, hey, it's only loud if I'm paying attention. And I'm not paying attention anymore. And by the way, they're angry. Then they'll start to rant about how I blocked them. Well, the person I blocked was like anti-theist 124, with the devil horn picture, this little icon. Okay, really? You want me seriously? I mean, if you can't even identify me with your name and your picture, I don't feel that bad about blocking you. But the point is, it really comes down to noise. If you're coming in with a sincere question, but if you're just pretending, so you can eventually get in there and be the hammer on somebody who has a sincere question. Well, I'm taking out, this is why I always say too, you mentioned about the website. Social media is rental property. The website is your home, okay? I have rental properties, and I don't own those rental properties. Now, at our website, we are shifting everything over to a private community, which is like social media, only we control the ground it stands on. So we're uploading our videos there. So that's expensive, and so it's not going to be free, but it's private. You're not going to be at least in a private social media family, a community. And I think all of us eventually are going to shift to this. I just did it because I saw the Daily Wire was starting, and all these other platforms were starting to have a private community behind a protected barrier. And you use different servers. You're just making sure you're not cancelable, right? And that also it helps people to have these kinds of relationships where they can bare their soul to other brothers and sisters in Christ without worrying about somebody being there trolling and getting ready to hammer down on somebody. So I do think that probably is our future. So what I typically do is if I tell people, look, if I'm going to block you on Twitter and you're upset, well, you know where to find me. I've got a website. You can make a comment on the website, which they often will. And then I have their email because they have to give me their email. So then I can email them back and we can get involved in a private dialogue. Yeah. So we can develop a relationship behind which we can discuss the truth. Yeah. So in the end, what I'm trying to do in all of my efforts is to get you from the rental properties where you're just visiting me into my home where we can have a longer conversation. And that can be a digital home. It can be your website. It can be some place where you could, because here's what I suggest. Do you honestly think that those people who are the hammers looking for nails on social media would continue to do so if they didn't have the public platform that you developed with your content?
No.
No.
I want the public platform.
If all of this was, they can say anything they want, but it's all going to be sent privately to me. It will not be sent publicly to anybody. They stop sending stuff because their whole goal is to make a public proclamation of what an idiot you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Their goal is not to get involved in a private conversation about what's true. So this is why I say, and I always think this too, look, you and I, we have to make sure that we're doing this for the right reason. If I didn't know how many followers we have on any of these platforms, I'd still be doing what I'm doing now. This is just the expression of my faith. Mm-hmm. But if we're just doing it because we think we're growing this content, we're growing these social media platforms, shame on us. I wish they would stop showing how many subscribers we have. I wish that we couldn't even know how many subscribers we have, how many views we get. Would all of us continue to do this if they didn't have the data to demonstrate that we're really popular?
Yeah.
So I really think for me, as I want to step back at this age and make sure that the main thing is the main thing. And I want to get those relationships built from the people. And that means you might really only say to yourself, in the last 10 years, I've had maybe 10 people that I really know I had an impact on. Mm-hmm. As opposed to be thinking, I could have had impacted thousands on my social media. Well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Let's get into relationships with people. You'll notice that is really the way of the master, is that every encounter, it was the woman at the well. Not all the Samaritans who were, now did he have public proclamations in preaching? Of course. But it's in the basis of relationships that you see heavy lifting being done. So let's do our best to get involved in relationships.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Hope that helps a little bit, Eric.
It does. It does.
That's a great question, by the way. Well, thanks, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm going to hop over and look at another question here, Jorge, if that's okay with you, and then
we'll before we got one more person, and then we're going to wrap it up. But before, instead of getting a question, I want you to tell people about the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy is coming up, and we have about 5 days. If you want to come, in order to be able to get in, you have to apply before the 15th of this month. So Jim, take it from here. Tell them how awesome the CIA is, where it's going to be, and it's August 12th to the 14th.
Yes, and we have limited seats. So I want this to close tonight. I want all of you to fill it up tonight. I don't know how many seats we have left, but I'll tell you, I've been involved in this.
We have about 15 seats left, more or less.
Okay, then we need to fill those now. Not because we're trying to fill seats. This has never been a moneymaker for, Jorge will tell you this. Last year was probably the biggest disaster of all, right? But the point I'm trying to make is this is not a profitability issue for us. This is about a discipleship issue. We've been talking about discipleship today. Every single person who comes through CIA ends up in an extended relationship with us as teachers, right? Because we end up knowing each other personally, and then we end up connected to each other for years to come. What we want to do is help you do exactly what Eric is talking about. Like, how do I navigate this world? How do I become a better public speaker? How do I become a better private speaker? How do I become a better writer so I can write on websites? How do I become a better communicator of the gospel? That's what we're doing at CIA. And I'll tell you that if you can get a better lineup of apologists, not that I'm there, I'm talking about, I feel like I'm usually standing in greatness. So it's great. And it's always a little bit different every year. This year we have Natasha Crane, we've got Jorge, we've got Frank, we've got Greg Kokel, we've got Brett Kunkel, we've got Sean McDowell, we've got Richard, who is, Richard Howe is like the funniest, smartest man you're ever going to meet. We've got Elisa Childers. If you're somebody who's been reading apologetics books, you probably already got these guys' books and these gals' books. This is a good time to come and meet the authors and spend 3 intensive days. And I will tell you, it wears me out. Okay. I'm glad to do it, but oh my gosh, it's like this is intense. And this is not your casual, you're going to get every dime out of this. Trust me. And so I hope you'll join us. It's in California this year in Chino Hills at Jack Hibbs Church, Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. If you don't know Jack, this guy's a warrior for the faith. It's a great place to come. It's going to be hot and will be a nice, cool, air-conditioned environment, and you'll be learning from the best case makers that are probably teaching right now. And I don't think you'll regret it. So yeah, please join us because we should fill that up immediately. If you miss it this year, it's people always ask, "Oh, did I miss it this year?" They got to wait a whole year to go. Don't miss it this year. Just sign up now.
All you have to do is go to crossexamine.org, click on events, and you will see the tab there with the CIA. And now we have, if I'm not mistaken, Kendall. Kendall, you can come in and unmute your mic.
Good to see you, brother.
You can go ahead and unmute your mic so we can have you in. There you
go. Hey, how's it going, Mr. Wallace?
It's going good.
Honor to meet you.
No, it's really good to see you. I love how everyone's got the technology. They're blurring their backgrounds. This is just too cool. All right, so tell me what you got going.
Yeah, I don't quite have as many accolades to show on in the back.
I know. Let's just listen. When you get old and lame, you have to make yourself look better. More important than you are. Okay, so I'm doing my best.
No. We definitely appreciate your service, by the way, as a police officer, especially nowadays, and all of what you do with the Thin Blue Line. So,
yeah, thank you.
First, I just wanted to say I'm referencing when I'm asking this question in reference to a video that you posted in regards to the flood account and how biblical authors seem to be accurately describing nature around them, even ancient authors. And my question is in regard to hermeneutics, is how, obviously a lot of the language, especially Psalms and a lot of these things in Job are metaphorical. So how do we hermeneutically say, okay, yes, it is a metaphor, but it just also so happens to be the factual and accurate?
Well, this is the struggle, and this is what divides us sometimes as Christians. When I see the vitriol over two things, creation account, right, in Genesis 1, and the flood account, even amongst Christians, and how do we read this? Because English is one of the greatest languages because we have so many nuanced words. The number of words in the English language compared to the number of words in Hebrew or in Greek is astonishing. So what you have when you have less words to select from, you have to use one word to mean a number of things. But we still do that. We still do that today with some of the words that we use. So we have to kind of figure out, how do we read this? Number one, what is the genre of the book? Is it an historical account? Is it poetry? Is it, is it an historical narrative? Is it a letter or just a set of proverbial statements? There's lots of different kinds of genre within the New Testament and the Old Testament, and we got to lock in what is what. Now, there is still, even then, there is debate over what the genre might be, mostly related to Genesis 1, more so than to other aspects of either the Genesis account or, and that's where you find the flood account as well. So the biggest debate usually around the flood account is what we mean by a universal flood. A flood, is it a flood that is universally destructive? Or is it a flood that is in its totality encompasses the entire earth? And you'll have some groups on one side or the Christians now I'm talking about, who will hold to one of these views or the other, because the way the words are used, they could, depending on the context of the word usage, it could mean universal in the sense of it being all-encompassing geographically, or it could be universal in terms of it being all-destructive in its power. So the question then becomes, well, which of these two? And so I have friends who are Christian case makers who are on both sides of this debate. I think Richard Howe, for example, believes in it's a universally totality of the earth is covered with the flood. And I think like a Hugh Ross, I think believes in a geographic, universally destructive local kind of flood. That's what his interpretation is. Now look, so people will ask me then, Kendall, well, what's your interpretation, Jen? And I would typically say it doesn't matter. And that's where the fire starts. So that's like the third option, right? That you're rather agnostic about which of these two readings is correct. And of course, now you haven't ingratiated yourself with either side. You basically just made both sides mad. Okay, so at least if you picked one of the two sides, only half would be mad at you. But if you hold this position like I do, that look, I think that I see the argument evidentially for this side, and I'm persuaded on days by that. But I think the argument's pretty close for the other side, and I'm persuaded on days by that. So here's the analogy I typically use, and you see if it has any value for you. Every case I work in which a suspect does not confess to the crime prior to trial, our team, this is 5 officers and 1 sergeant, we will theorize on what his motive was, how did he get in, why did he get in that way, what exactly did he do first? Did he kill her downstairs and drag her upstairs? Did he just kill her upstairs, and then the blood trails from him touching stuff on the way down? You know what I'm saying? We're trying to assess the evidence and figure out like how did he do it? Why did he do it? And when, we don't know because he hasn't confessed to us. And we have theories because we're looking at the evidence, and we're all looking at the same evidence, by the way, the same evidence at the crime scene, and we're just trying to figure out which inference is best from the evidence in the crime scene. And then we end up with theories, and the 5 of us will usually end up with 2 to 5 theories. Sometimes it's just a couple of theories that would 2 or 3 of us embrace. Sometimes each of us has got a different theory. Now, what we discover typically is after we convict this guy, if we convict them, or if like at sentencing sometimes, or if we do a plea deal where we'll say, hey, we'll give you this deal, but you're going to have to confess to it and tell us exactly how you did it first. I've done a couple of those cases. And sure enough, when the person finally confesses to it, all of us are like, oh man, we're all wrong. We got pieces of this right, but you know why part of it is because none of us who are trying to figure this out are murderers, and murderers don't think like the guys who aren't murderers. And so you're like going, how do I get into the mind of a murderer if you aren't that sociopathic? How do I get in there, right? Like you don't think the same as him. And so it ends up he's done it some 5th or 6th way that you never even thought about. And you're like going, dang, how did I miss that? Okay. In the end, we're doing the same thing here. We're looking at evidence in the crime scene, which is the Bible, and we're looking at the word evidence, the language evidence of the crime scene. And we've got a couple of different inferences from the evidence, and we're looking at each other and kind of wondering. But as it turns out, we're not going to know exactly which of these inferences is correct until we get the confession of, in this case, God.
That's right.
And so I'm prepared to hold that theory with an open hand until I meet God face to face. And one of the first questions I'll have is, well, what was that Genesis 1 thing? And what was the flood thing about, right? Like, I want to know, right? And we're going to get all those questions answered. And be prepared when you get your answer that just like with the answer with the suspect, that both of you are going to be wrong at some huge level that you didn't think you were wrong. And because you think you don't think like a criminal? Oh, trust me, you don't think like God. So the gap between God's mind and ours is a lot bigger than the gap between mine and the guy who did the murder. So it turns out that I expect to have some things correct in my inferences and some things incorrect, given my limited capacity to understand. That's why I hold these theories lightly, and I am not willing to divide from my partners over this. It turns out, even though we had different theories, we still loved each other as partners. We were still a team. Well, we got to be a team, even though we don't have the answers to some of these bigger questions about the flood or bigger questions about Genesis 1.
Well, and I definitely appreciate you saying that, because that's another reason I'm asking the question is I see a lot of the division that happens, especially over the Genesis 1 creation and post-millennialism, premillennialism, all of that great stuff. So, I definitely see that. But a lot of the times I kind of ask myself, I just tend to go back to Paul, a lot of the Pauline letters, and say we're supposed to be united, that's the biggest thing, and whether one's right or one's wrong. So,
but look at it this way, Kendall. You know how we talk about what's the best evidence for Jesus, for the truth of Jesus and the resurrection, for the truth of Christian worldview, for the truth of God's existence? Like we're always thinking, what's the best evidence? You know what Jesus said the best evidence was? You think it's in John 14 to 17, right in that range. It's in his last long discussion with his disciples before he goes to the cross. He talks about our unity will demonstrate that what he has said about himself is true. Our unity. Now, look, I'm not suggesting that we unify by kicking the truth to the curb. Absolutely. Or by compromising on the claims. And that's where I can see the rub. I can see that, hey, if unity means that those of us who deny the deity of Christ have to, live and call ourselves Christians along with those of us who affirm the deity of Christ. Okay, well, look, I get it. There are some things that we would say are essentials. So we had to decide here. is our precise but this is why, honestly, if someone said to me, well, I believe that there's 7 literal days, I'm going to say, God bless you, amen, I'm with you. But if someone said to me, I believe it's 7 epic periods of time, I'm going to basically have the same response, because I do not consider this to be an essential. And by the way, no creed of history, of Christian history, has ever posited that the precise understanding of either young earth or old earth on the Genesis 1 account was a Christian essential. Okay, it's not part of any creed. So the question then becomes, well, why are we making those things that we've never been considered creedal truths, the things that we would be willing to divide over? And I'm just not willing to divide over it. So I think that's what I always say it this way. When you have you're in patrol and you're driving your police car and then shots fired, officer down, dude, you're going to roll by a lot of felonies in progress that you are not stopping for. If people running through red lights or stop signs, you're not stopping for those. Not writing tickets right now. I'm en route to a shots fired, man down. Okay, so a lot of you guys are going to get off today because this is a different kind of day. This is a day where I got to get to this guy, and so you're going to roll by a lot of stuff that is misdemeanor and infraction stuff. You don't even care. Now, what we're doing in our culture is we're in a shots fired culture, guys. Okay, the gospel has to be preached right now. All right. I am not going to navel gaze, argue about things that are non-essentials. I'm driving right by those like misdemeanors because I am en route to a man down, shots fired. And that's what we have to do with the gospel right now. And so it's about us deciding that this is worth driving by and not stopping for. So
I appreciate the analogies. That's one of the reasons I'm so thankful. My father kind of just mentioned your name to me a few years ago, said, man, you should check this guy out. And so I've dove in. I mean, I was going to give a shameless plug to all of your great materials that you have, but I will say that that's one of the best things. And I guess if there is time, my second question was going to be hopefully a little quicker and shorter. I've been serving in the church for the last few.
Jorge. Let's sneak it in real quick. Go.
Okay. So, I've been serving in the church for the last few years in the youth ministry. And so one of the things I know this stuff is vital when it comes to apologetics, especially so the next generation will know, obviously tells us that this is the time to nurture that kind of stuff and to cultivate questions and stuff like that. What is the best way that you found to, I guess where I'm at is I'm trying to mesh the material given to me to teach and the stuff that I know is important and to kind of coincide those two.
Well, look, I always say this, you've probably heard me say it before, that no curriculum you get, if it is from me, is going to be something you can use without adaptation. Right. Every curriculum I've ever been handed as a teacher was something that I then had to adapt. Even if it was great curriculum, like apologetics curriculum, I know my group. I know what they'll sit still for. I know what they're going to go, I'm out of that. So it's okay for you to take and it should, and hopefully your leadership will give you the permission and freedom not to reject what they're giving you, but to adapt it so it's the most successful it can be. And that's the way you have to posit it with them. And then I think you have complete and utter liberty. Remember, you don't need to, I have a tendency to overwhelm people with presentation. I'm going to give you 50 things you're not going to remember. But with young people, I realize that, hey, just make one thing the one thing tonight. It doesn't take a lot, just one thing, the one thing. And so I would look for every factual claim that your curriculum is making. Just ask yourself, does that same curriculum defend the claim? Does the curriculum just state the truth, or does the curriculum state the truth and explain? Remember we always said 2 whys for every what, right? Yep. So that curriculum is probably giving you what's. What is true about this? What is true? You got to give the 2 whys. Well, why is it true? And 2, why should I care? Now what that means is that you might get 3 claims in your curriculum that night. Well, you know what? Maybe you can't get through all 3 claims. Pick the one, because you got to go through 2 whys. So those 2 whys need space. You got to take time with those 2 whys. So I always say, if you've got curriculum, they're handing you Bible curriculum, then all you have to do is insert the whys, because I'll bet you they've got what's in there, but no whys.
Absolutely.
So what you want to do is just insert the whys. And I would just say minimize, so you can do 1 important what and the 2 whys, and then you're good to go, if that helps.
No, absolutely it does. And again, thank you for all of you, what you do, you and your wife and the Cadet Academy, all of it.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's the best thing we do is with kids, with the Cadet Academy, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
And Jorge, thank you, obviously, for making this happen. So thank you all very much.
Right. Absolutely, man. You got it, Kendall. All right.
Thanks, man.
All right, Jim, this is the end of the hour, man. We've made it with 5 minutes to spare. So want to remind everybody, you did fantastic, man. Want to remind everybody about the Cross-Examining Instructor Academy. All you have to do is go to crossexamine.org, click on the events tab, and click the what is CIA. You can find all the information here. Is August 12th to the 14th. Is 3 full days, almost 12-hour days. They feel like 18-hour days, really. And you know it, Jim. We're
Yes.
gonna be like Jim says, gonna be him, Greg Kokel, Richard Howe, Frank is gonna be there, Alyssa Childers, Natasha Crane, Brett Conkle, Sean McDowell, and myself. All you have to do is come over here, click on this button and apply now, and make sure that we have about 10 spots left, more or less, and we also fill up pretty quick. So 5 days away, and after the 15 is the weirdest thing. And I know I am borderline millennial, and I always wait until the last minute. And again, we get a lot of those applications after the 15, and I'll just have to play the violin for those that don't get in at the last minute. So make sure that you go ahead on and fill out that application today. And with that being said, this is Hope One. So I'm going to leave you, Jim, with the question that we ask all of our guests, even though you are the host today. And that is, what is our hope?
Yeah, our hope is singularly focused on the thing that I can't put my hope in myself. I'm not capable of doing what I most desire, which is to be unified with my Maker. So our hope is always going to be where? Of course, it's going to be in the cross. Our hope is in what Jesus did for us, the one thing we cannot do for ourselves. So look, folks, we can talk about apologetics. We can make the case for God's existence. We can give you all the data points. In the end, the message that persuades, that changes everything, is that regardless of who you've been, regardless of your past, regardless of your failings, regardless of those areas that you think you are terrible at, God's not going to look at any of those, because he came, died on a cross, paid the price that we cannot pay for ourselves. And when we put our trust in that, in what Jesus did for us on the cross, we satisfy the penalty for the sins we've committed. And we stand before God, and he sees the righteousness of Jesus. Even in our fallen images, in our fallen nature, he sees the righteousness of Jesus. If that's not hope, if you don't have hope, look, as you get older, have you ever watched Phil Robertson on the Unashamed podcast from Duck Dynasty? He always says, as he's in his 70s, every day he says the resurrection is a looming reality. And it is for all of us at some point. Wouldn't you much rather close your eyes for the last time and know you will be in the presence of your Maker? That's the hope we have. So I hope they take that hope and join us next week, and join Frank when he'll be back. And thanks so much for having me, and we'll see you here next week.